I never thought I would become a laughingstock in both my family and my workplace. They called me the family pity case, the shameful burden of the clan. They laughed when they saw me struggling with 3 children and no wedding ring on my hand. My colleagues turned me into the name whispered behind my back, and my own sister stood before a crowd, raising her glass to sneer. That is the perfect example of a woman's failure. But what they didn't know was that every insult, every contemptuous glance became the smoldering fire inside me. And when the time came, that fire ignited, transforming me from a pity case into a symbol, from someone dismissed into the woman the entire hall rose to honor. This is my story. Chapter 1. Corporate Shadows. I never thought I would become the laughingstock of both my family and my company. I once believed that as long as I worked hard, gave everything I had, people would treat me fairly. But it seems that in this world, women like me, a single mother with 3 young children, are always the easiest target for mockery and disdain. Every morning, I arrived at the office earlier than most. When the lights were still dim, I was already sitting in front of my screen, reviewing every number, every email, every contract. The Morrison account, the company's largest client, had been entrusted to me for 3 years, and not once had they complained. I knew every detail of that file better than anyone else. But then, when Jennifer, my younger sister, and also my colleague, was promoted, everything suddenly shifted. Jennifer not only took the position that should have been mine, but she also restructured things so that my desk was moved into a corner wide open for everyone passing by to see. No more privacy, no more partition walls for a shield. I had become an exposed target, easy for anyone to scrutinize, gossip about, and ridicule. That morning, as I stepped into the elevator, I ran into Jennifer. She flashed a sugary smile, her voice dripping with honey, but every word cut like a sharp blade. "Susan, I don't know how you manage with 3 kids in this job, but some people at the company are starting to wonder if you're juggling too much." She spoke loudly, making sure Marcus from accounting and Sarah from marketing could hear. They quickly looked away, pretending to be busy, but the awkwardness on their faces stabbed me right in the chest. I pressed my lips together and replied, "My work speaks for itself." But inside my heart pounded so fast, as if afraid that even the smallest crack would make me shatter. Jennifer only tilted her head with a smirk. "Of course, sweetie." Then she strutted out of the elevator, as if she had just bestowed some kind of blessing. Passing the pantry, I caught sight of Uncle David, the same uncle who once taught me to ride a bike, who used to bounce me on his knee when I was little. Now he leaned against the counter, coffee cup in hand, lowering his voice just enough for the surrounding group to hear. Not everyone is cut out for this environment. You need a solid foundation, and some people clearly don't have it. His gaze locked onto me, his smile predatory. I sat down at my desk, reminding myself to focus on the Morrison account. Numbers don't lie, but people do. And I could feel it deep inside. I was being isolated, cornered. Only 6 months ago, I had a desk near the window, bathed in natural light, with a little sense of privacy. Now every move I made was under constant watch. The moment I slipped, even for a second, someone would surely take note and twist it into evidence against me. I opened my email to find a chaotic overlap of schedules, a client meeting, a message from Emma's school about a parent conference, a reschedule of Michael's soccer practice, and Sophie's doctor's appointment confirmation. I felt trapped in a tangled equation, each variable a responsibility I could not abandon. And I knew just one wrong move and everything would collapse like a domino effect. Everyone looked at me with eyes that mixed pity and contempt. They didn't know that I was holding everything together with sheer willpower. To them, I was nothing but the single mom with 3 kids, a pitiful case, a living cautionary tale of women who chose the wrong path. But in my own eyes, I knew the truth. I was not useless. I just hadn't been given the chance to prove that every label they slapped on me was a lie. That was when I began to realize. Perhaps the day would come when I'd have to flip the board entirely. Chapter 2. The Pressure of a Single Mother. There are days when I feel like I live by the frantic breaths of the ticking wall clock. Every minute, Every second is tied to a responsibility, a call, a message, a task that no one but me can carry. The morning begins when the sky is still gray. Emma needs me to sign her application form for the math club. Michael is yelling because he can't find his socks for soccer practice. Sophie clings to her box of crayons, insisting that I draw a flower with her before she goes to school. And while I soothe her, prepare breakfast, and pack lunch boxes, my mind is already running through the company's checklist, the Morrison account, the quarterly report, the numbers I must submit on time. When I get to the office, the phone never stops buzzing. A message from the school. We invite Emma's parent to a meeting due to her declining math scores. Another email Michael needs to arrive at the field earlier for extra practice. And then a notification from the clinic appointment confirmed for Sophie's health check tomorrow morning. Each message feels like a jagged shard stacking one atop the other, making my breath quicken. I know that if I miss even one meeting, someone will brand me an irresponsible mother. And if I make even one mistake in a report, the whole company will say I'm not capable of handling big tasks. But the cruelest part isn't the workload, it's the eyes, those glances that carry half pity, half judgment. The colleague at the next desk, backed by her husband's support, occasionally says, "You're amazing." Really handling 3 kids and still holding on to your job. The words sound like praise, but beneath them lies doubt. How much longer can she last? That afternoon, while I was still bent over my screen, racing to finish a data file, Margaret from HR walked over. In her hands was a stack of documents, her face serious yet stiff, as if she had rehearsed in the mirror. "Susan, I need to see you in my office, right now." The entire office stirred. I heard the shuffle of chairs, the whispers. Jennifer stood at the doorway of her private office, arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Inside HR's office, the faint, artificial vanilla scent nearly choked me. Margaret opened the file and read slowly, "We have received complaints regarding you missing deadlines, submitting incomplete projects, and showing signs of distraction." Her words fell like hammer strikes. But I knew the truth. None of it was real. I pulled out my phone, opened my calendar, my email confirmations, the time-stamped files. Every deadline was met, even ahead of schedule. These claims are false. Here's the proof. I placed the phone right in front of Margaret. Her eyes flickered uneasily, darting back to the folder before she muttered, "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding?" No apology, no acknowledgement, only vagueness. Because I knew someone was pulling the strings, building an invisible wall to block my path upward. That evening, I didn't leave my desk when the clock struck 5. I stayed working with absolute precision, determined to leave no room for anyone to catch a slip. When the office was empty under the lonely glow of yellow lights, Carlos, the janitor, passed by. He stopped, looked at me, and shook his head. "You work harder than anyone here. Don't let them forget that." I smiled, but my eyes were already wet. His words, simple and sincere, meant more to me than any compliment I had received in the past year. That night, sitting in my car, in the parking lot, my head resting against the steering wheel, I asked myself, when will I no longer have to prove my worth? Chapter 3, Little Rays of Light. In the days when it felt like the sky was nothing but heavy clouds, sometimes even the smallest ray of light was enough to keep me standing. That evening, I returned home after another exhausting day. Dinner was nothing more than pasta with tomato sauce hurriedly set on the table. My 3 children crowded around me, each with a story to tell. Michael proudly announced that he had scored a goal during practice. Emma frowned over a math problem she couldn't solve, and Sophie gleefully held up a drawing she had just finished. "Look, Mommy," she squealed, thrusting the colorful paper toward me. On it was a large desk, and behind it sat a woman wearing a purple crown. At the top of the picture, in uneven crayon letters, she had written, "The Boss." I laughed out loud, pulling her into my arms. "And who's this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sophie lifted her shining eyes. "That's you. You're the biggest boss in the world." I hugged her tighter, my nose stinging unexpectedly. In her eyes, I wasn't the pity case whispered about at the company. In her eyes, I was a queen, someone unbreakable. In that moment, I felt strength surge back into me. That night after the children had gone to sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen, the yellow light reflecting off the smudges of ink still on my hands. I had long grown used to loneliness, but Sophie's little drawing seemed to brighten the entire room. Maybe I couldn't control the contemptuous glances of my colleagues or silence the sneers from my family, but in my children's hearts, I was still their only pillar, and perhaps that was enough to keep me moving forward. 3 days later, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door. No sender's name, only a line written neatly in black ink. "You deserve to see this." I opened it. Inside was a cream-colored card with golden edges that shimmered. Invitation to the annual company awards gala. I froze. I remembered clearly how Jennifer had once casually mentioned that my invitation email had bounced back and that the guest list had already closed. I knew she had deliberately excluded me, ensuring that she alone would shine that night without my shadow anywhere near her. So why was the invitation now lying under my door, accompanied by that mysterious note? A friend. But who would consider me a friend in that office filled with cold stares? I held the card in my hand for a long time, torn between excitement and unease. Jennifer's voice echoed in my head, along with the mocking laughter of coworkers and Uncle David's words that I wasn't built for this world. But then from another corner of my memory, Sophie's drawing appeared again, with its radiant purple crown. Maybe it was time for me to stop hiding in the shadows. If the whole world was waiting for me to stumble, then I would show them I could step onto that stage with my head held high. Chapter 4, Gala Public Humiliation. The night of the gala arrived, the glittering lights from the luxurious hotel, reflecting off the black dress I had worn 5 years ago to a relative's wedding. It hung loosely now on my thinner frame, the result of too many skipped lunches, but it was the best I had. I walked through the grand lobby, forcing myself to appear composed. Around me, people shimmered in expensive gowns and polished tuxedos. The clinking of champagne glasses and booming laughter filled the air like melodies I had never belonged to. I chose to slip around to a side entrance, avoiding the reception desk, where Jennifer stood like a blazing red star in the crowd, her gown clinging to her figure, her triumphant smile spread wide. I tucked myself into the shadows behind a marble pillar, quietly observing. Yet even there, I could feel the prying stares of a few, as if they all knew I didn't belong in that room. When dinner ended, the lights dimmed and the stage brightened. The CEO stepped onto the podium, his voice booming as he spoke of achievements, innovation, and the dedication of employees. The ballroom fell silent, admiring as he announced the most prestigious award of the year, Employee of the Year. And no one was surprised when the name called was Jennifer's. Thunderous applause erupted, the spotlight shining down on my sister. Jennifer glided to the stage as though it were her private runway, her posture proud, her smile radiant. I saw Uncle David at the front table, his face glowing with pride as if this were his own victory. Jennifer held the gleaming crystal trophy, adjusted the microphone, and began her speech. Her voice rang across the hall. I am deeply honored to receive this award. It is not only for me, but also for the examples that have guided me, some of them positive and some of them negative. My heart pounded, hard dread creeping in. And tonight Jennifer continued, pausing deliberately to heighten the attention. I want to give special thanks to my sister, Susan. She has shown me exactly what a woman should never be. 3 kids, no wedding ring, one wrong choice after another. A perfect example of a family pity case. For a split second, I thought I hadn't heard right, but then the ballroom erupted in laughter. Some bent over their tables, pretending to hide their mouths. Others laughed out loud, clapping as if it were the wittiest joke they had ever heard. I felt the champagne glass trembling in my hand, the liquid threatening to spill. My scalp burned hot, my heart sinking into a pit. And it didn't stop there. Uncle David rose to his feet, his voice booming. Just like her mother, like daughter, the room exploded again, this time with louder, crueler laughter. I felt exposed, stripped bare in front of everyone. All those years of effort, countless sleepless nights, the swallowed tears the burdens carried, reduced to a joke right there before my colleagues, my relatives, my so-called family. My head rang, my fists clenched so tight that my nails dug into my skin. I had to summon every ounce of strength not to bolt from the room. In that moment, a bitter truth struck me. Jennifer hadn't simply wanted the award. She hadn't only wanted recognition. She wanted the stage lights to cast me as the shadow. She wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone, to turn my existence into nothing but a pitiful warning. But even at the deepest point of humiliation, I felt a small flame ignite inside me. Not because I craved her spotlight, but because I knew if I bowed my head, they would think they were right. And I swore to myself, no matter what it took, one day, I would turn the board over. Chapter 5. Twist Chapter 1. The CEO's Reversal. As the mocking laughter still echoed through the hall, I thought I would collapse right there. But then another sound cut through, so strong, so commanding, it forced everyone into silence. The scrape of a chair crossed the floor. I lifted my head and saw the CEO, Raymond Coleman, rising to his feet. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he strode purposefully toward the stage. His footsteps echoed in the hushed ballroom. Jennifer faltered slightly, the crystal trophy in her hand, glinting under the lights, her proud smile beginning to tremble. Raymond took the microphone from my sister's hand, his voice deep and resolute. Enough. Just one word, yet it rang out like a bell, silencing the last cruel chuckles. His gaze swept across the room before settling on the spot where I stood, half hidden behind a column. Tonight, we honor dedication and talent, but there is a truth that has been ignored for far too long. He paused, letting the silence weigh heavy on every word. The Morrison account, our company's largest contract. Who here knows who has personally sustained, managed, and grown that relationship for the past 3 years? No one answered. My face burned hot, my hand gripping the champagne glass so tightly I barely dared to breathe. Raymond's voice grew firm. It was Susan Patterson, not Jennifer, not anyone else. It was Susan who secured nearly 30% of this quarter's profits. It was Susan who resolved crises most of you never even knew existed. And it is Susan who embodies the resilience and dedication this company truly needs. Murmurs rippled across the hall. I saw expressions shift from ridicule to shock. Jennifer stood frozen, forcing a smile that could not hide the panic draining her face of color. Raymond turned his steady gaze toward me. Susan, I apologize for allowing you to endure unfairness for so long. And right here, I want to announce from today onward, all critical personnel decisions will be subject to your review and final say. Because I trust in your integrity. The ballroom erupted like thunder. Some people were so stunned they dropped their glasses. Others whispered frantically. I distinctly heard Uncle David stammer, "Impossible. She's just a single mother, how could?" But his words died the moment Raymond's sharp eyes cut toward him. We evaluate employees based on results, not on family prejudices or petty gossip. I stood rooted to the floor, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or simply accept that this was truly happening. For the first time in my life, I no longer felt small. I was no longer the family pity case. I was the woman the CEO himself had risen to defend before hundreds of eyes. Jennifer tried to grab back the microphone, her voice trembling. You're mistaken. It was me who but Raymond cut her off instantly. No, Miss Hartwell, I have every report, every email, every proof of who did the work. If you continue to claim credit, I'll be forced to treat it as a more serious matter. The entire hall fell deathly silent. Jennifer stumbled back, her hand, shaking so violently the trophy nearly slipped. Uncle David turned away, his face flushed red, his earlier bravado gone. I stood there, my heart hammering, and for the first time, I didn't see myself as small at all. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't a joke. I wasn't a family pity case. I was someone even the CEO had to rise and defend. And in that blinding moment beneath the heavy air and dazzling lights, I made a quiet vow this would only be the beginning. Chapter 6. After the gala. The beginning of change. The gala ended, and I left the hotel on trembling legs. The glittering lights, the whispers still echoed in my ears. As the door shut behind me, I drew a long breath as though I had just escaped a storm. But deep down, I knew the real storm was only just beginning. The very next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages poured in like a flood. A few colleagues sent congratulations, but most were venomous lines from unknown numbers. She must have seduced the boss to get that position. A single mom could never have real ability. She sure knows how to take advantage. I read them, then deleted them, but every word pierced me like a needle to the skin. Some of the numbers I even recognized colleagues who once sat beside me, in meetings who once offered polite smiles, now openly throwing stones. I carried the weight of it home trying to act normal in front of the kids, but Emma's sharp eyes caught it. She simply whispered, "Mom, don't listen to them. I know you're strong." My daughter's words were like a small umbrella shielding me in the middle of a violent storm. That afternoon, as I struggled with unfinished reports, an email popped up: breakfast meeting. 9 a.m. My office. Raymond. I blinked. In 3 years at this company, never once had the CEO emailed me directly, and certainly not signed with his first name. The next morning, I slipped on my worn-out suit and stepped into the elevator leading to the executive floor, a place I had never set foot in. My heart pounded, palms slick with sweat. Raymond's office was vast, its glass walls overlooking the city. He stood with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him, his posture like an unshakable monument. On a side table, 2 cups of steaming coffee waited. "Thank you for coming," he said, turning around. To my surprise, his eyes weren't cold, as I had imagined. They held something strikingly human. I sat down, keeping my distance. He began, "Last night I said what needed to be said. But I wanted to tell you directly, I've been watching you for the past 3 years. I know you've worked twice as hard as anyone else carrying loads no one else acknowledged. And I also know there are people who deliberately stood in your way." I tightened my grip on the coffee cup, lifted my eyes to meet his. "But why did you stand up at that exact moment?" Raymond exhaled the corner of his lips, curving into a faint smile. "Because I couldn't stand watching someone with real talent be turned into a punchline. And because this company needs your integrity, Susan, not just in work, but in the way you face adversity." The room fell silent for a few seconds. I felt a shift, subtle but undeniable. No longer was I fighting alone in the shadows. Someone had publicly chosen to stand beside me. As I walked out of his office, it struck me this was the beginning of a new game, and this time I was no longer a pawn to be moved at someone else's will. Chapter 7. Promotion and Direct Confrontation. The news reached me faster than I had imagined. Just 2 days after the meeting, HR sent an email I was officially appointed Senior Vice President of Operations. I read that line over and over, my heart both soaring and sinking. For years, I had only dreamed of a single chance to be recognized. And now here it was, arriving amidst the chaos. On my first day stepping onto the executive floor, the atmosphere felt entirely different. The receptionist greeted me with a respect I had never been given before. The door to my new office opened, revealing a bright space with a walnut desk and windows overlooking the entire city. On the desk sat a small nameplate, Susan Patterson, SVP Operations. I brushed my fingers lightly over the letters, feeling as though I had finally carved out a place of my own. But that joy didn't last long. That afternoon in the cafeteria, as I stood in line for coffee, I heard Jennifer's voice ring out just behind me, loud enough for everyone around to hear. Some people really know how to use their bodies to climb up. One day, just a nobody. The next day, suddenly a boss. Too obvious. A few chuckles rose from those nearby. I turned around to face my sister. Jennifer crossed her arms, chin tilted high, her eyes gleaming with challenge. I locked eyes with her, my voice steady and clear. If you want to talk about me, say it directly to my face. I'm ready to listen instead of hearing you whisper behind my back. The air went still. I knew every eye was now on us. Jennifer flinched for a moment, then smirked. Oh, I'm just speaking the truth. Everyone can see it. I drew a deep breath, feeling the anger boiling inside, but I kept my tone firm. The truth is, I managed the Morrison account for 3 years, bringing in 30% of the company's profits. The truth is, I've never missed a single deadline. And the truth is, I have every piece of evidence to prove I deserve my role. What you call truth is nothing but jealousy and lies. The room fell silent. I noticed a few employees at nearby tables, pretending to be absorbed in their meals, but the corners of their lips curled upward. They couldn't hide their satisfaction at seeing Jennifer cornered. Just then, Margaret from HR approached. Her voice was sharp, Jennifer Hartwell. I need you in my office immediately. There have been multiple reports of your inappropriate behavior. Jennifer's face drained of color, though she tried to keep her composure. I was just talking casually. Margaret's tone hardened. No. You've repeatedly made comments that constitute harassment and defamation of a colleague. If this continues, the company will have no choice but to terminate your contract. The entire cafeteria froze. I looked at Jennifer and for the first time saw genuine fear flicker in her eyes. She hesitated for a few seconds, then lowered her head and quietly followed Margaret out. I sat down, took a sip of my coffee. What I felt wasn't triumph, but something different, like the scales had finally begun to shift. For the first time, I was no longer forced into silence. That evening at home, I told my children a small part of the story, that today their mother had stood up for herself. Emma beamed with pride. See, I told you. You're strong, Mom. I pulled all three into my arms, silently reminding myself this battle is far from over. But at least I had taken a firm step on the path to reclaiming what I deserved. Chapter 8. Executive Meeting, The Power of Numbers. On my first executive meeting day, I stepped into the vast room with its gleaming wooden table, surrounded by faces I had only ever seen attached to important emails before. The air felt heavy, as if every pair of eyes were fixed on me, waiting to see what this single mother of 3 would do when placed in a seat of power. Uncle David sat directly across from me, arms folded, his gaze sharp as ice. Jennifer sat quietly at the far end, her eyes red from her recent session with HR. The tension was palpable, like a string ready to snap. Raymond opened the meeting today. We'll discuss next quarter's strategy. But before we begin, I want to hear Susan's report on the Morrison account. I inhaled deeply, rose to my feet, and opened my file. The screen behind me lit up with the charts I had prepared meticulously. My voice wavered at first, but as the numbers appeared, I found my rhythm. Compared to last quarter, revenue from the Morrison account has increased by 18%. Client satisfaction scores reached 9.6 out of 10, the highest among all our accounts. I personally handled 3 major incidents which, had they not been resolved, would have cost us the contract. I paused, letting my eyes sweep the room. Several heads bent down to take notes. I knew they had never heard these numbers from Jennifer, who had always stolen the credit. I also have an email from the Morrison executives addressed directly to me, praising my dedication and affirming they only want to continue working with the person who has partnered with them for the past 3 years. Allow me to read a line. Susan understands us better than anyone. She is not just a partner. She is our protector. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Some department heads nodded, even smiled faintly. I felt recognition beginning to spread, subtle but undeniable. David slammed his hand on the table. Those numbers could be inflated. How do we know Susan isn't embellishing the truth? I didn't flinch. I pulled out a folder of printed emails, signed contracts, and even internal reports stamped with timestamps. I slid them across the table toward him. This is the truth. Data does not lie. If you want to verify, the company's system still has every record." He was silenced. The room hung heavy in stillness until another voice broke through. Tom, the head of finance, known for his skepticism. "I have to admit, these figures match exactly what we've tracked. The Morrison account is indeed a highlight, and it's clear Susan has been managing it directly." For the first time, I saw Uncle David at a loss for words. Jennifer kept her head-bowed lips pressed tightly together. I sat down, my heart still pounding, but my chest lighter than it had been in years. This time I hadn't defended myself with words alone. I had wielded proof, cold, undeniable numbers. And as I left the meeting that day, I knew my position had truly changed. Chapter 9. The Psychological Strike. Not firing, but forcing them to witness. One late afternoon, a thick folder landed on my desk. On top was a small note from Raymond, your decision. No questions asked. I opened it. 2 names stood out clearly, Jennifer Hartwell and David Morrison. The file detailed every violation, every falsified report, every complaint from other employees. Any single one of these would have been enough for immediate termination. I sat in silence, my hand resting on the papers, feeling the weight of power gleaming like a sharp blade. With just one signature, I could end Jennifer's arrogance and the years of David's oppression. Yet strangely, instead of satisfaction, another thought rose within me. If I fired them, they would vanish, find somewhere else to begin again. Perhaps spin a new story to justify themselves. Where would the justice be for all the years I had been trampled? No, I didn't want them to escape so easily. I wanted them to stay and watch me grow stronger every day, to witness every decision I made, every recognition I received, while they were forced to sit there in silence, unable to deny it. The next morning, I called Jennifer and David into my office. They entered with tense expressions, clearly bracing themselves for judgment. Jennifer glanced at me, her voice trembling yet still laced with defiance. "What are you going to do?" "Fire me," I smiled faintly. "No, you're staying." Both of them froze, disbelief etched across their faces. I continued, my voice slow and deliberate, each word striking. "Every day you will come here and sit in the meetings I lead. You will see my name on every contract, every document. You will address me as Senior Vice President Patterson. And each time you do, you will remember that gala night, when you made me the butt of your joke, only to face the bitter truth in front of your own eyes." Jennifer's face went pale, her lips moving soundlessly. David lowered his head, his hand trembling on his lap. The arrogance was gone. The mocking words had evaporated. What remained was a heavy silence, like a sentence hanging above them. I closed the folder firmly, my voice resolute. "Firing you would be a release. But I'm not choosing the easy way. This is not forgiveness. This is your sentence." They left the room looking more defeated than I had ever seen them. As the door shut behind them, I leaned back in my chair, feeling for the first time that true power wasn't in eliminating your enemies. It was in making them live each day with the knowledge that they had lost. That evening at dinner with my children, I shared a small part of the story, leaving out the harsher details. I simply told them I chose to let them stay so they would see the truth instead of running from it. Emma looked up, her eyes shining. "That's the real power, isn't it?" "Mom," I smiled. She was right. Power didn't lie only in victory. It lay in controlling the story, in forcing those who once humiliated you to witness your rise. Chapter 10. The Round Table. When allies appeared at paint the Spwermstswolt. A few weeks after the confrontation with Jennifer and David, I began to notice small changes in the office atmosphere. The prying stares and poisonous whispers gradually faded. In their place came different glances, still cautious, but no longer dripping with contempt. One morning, as I was reviewing financial reports, there was a gentle knock at the door. I looked up to see a young face, Samantha, the new employee in the marketing department. She clutched her notebook tightly, her eyes filled with both worry and determination. "Ms. Patterson," "Could I talk to you for a few minutes?" I invited her in. Samantha sat down, her hands clasped tightly together, her voice trembling softly. "I just wanted to thank you. I know about what happened with Jennifer and the way you stood up, the way you refused to be humiliated. It gave me hope." I froze for a moment. Hope I had never thought of it that way. All this time, I had only been fighting to keep from being swallowed whole. Samantha continued, her voice more earnest. "In this company, I'm not the only one who's been belittled. Many of us, especially young women, have been pushed aside. We're told to stay quiet, to be grateful, to accept it. But seeing you fight back, it made us realize we have rights too." Her words touched a part of me long buried. I realized then this battle was no longer mine alone. The next day, Samantha returned, but this time with 3 other colleagues, all young women. They wanted to meet with me to hear my story, to learn how to protect themselves from the manipulation they had witnessed. We sat in a circle in a small meeting room, no charts, no microphones, just an honest conversation. I told them about the days I was pushed into the office corner, stripped of opportunity, turned into a joke before hundreds of eyes. I told them about the loneliness, the silent labor, the stolen credit. And I told them about that gala night when the spotlight revealed the truth. They listened, their eyes gradually brightening, as though glimpsing a future they hadn't dared to imagine. One of them, a girl named Lily, whispered, "I think, if you could do it, then maybe we can too. We don't have to accept things the way they are." I smiled, feeling for the first time that my suffering had ignited something greater. "You can," I said. "But the key is to work excellently, to have proof to be unshakable, so when you face them, no one can deny you." The conversation ended, but I knew something new had begun. This was no longer just my fight. I now had allies, young faces, trembling voices, yet filled with a hunger for change. As I walked back to my office, I caught sight of Jennifer in the hallway, watching us leave the room. Her eyes no longer gleamed with disdain, but with a vague, unsettled fear. She understood I was no longer alone, and that was the true power. Chapter 11. The Long-Term Plan, Building a Legacy. Since that roundtable meeting, my perspective shifted. For years, I had only fought to survive, to endure, to keep myself from collapsing. But now, I realized that my existence and the way I stood back up could become a foundation for others. I began drafting a long-term plan. Not a plan for revenge against Jennifer or David. They had already imprisoned themselves in the shadows of their own shame. What I wanted now was to create a space where women didn't have to stay silent, where they wouldn't be pushed aside the way I once was. The first idea came naturally, the Women's Leadership Initiative, a program for training, mentoring, and empowering female employees in the company. I wrote a detailed proposal outlining goals, phases, and measurable outcomes. For the first time in my life, I felt I was working not just for myself, but for an entire generation standing behind me. On the day I presented it to the board, the room fell silent. I spoke of Samantha, of Lily, of the hungry eyes held back by suppression. I said, "We have lost too much talent simply because we never gave them the chance to shine. It's time for that to change." Some brows furrowed. A few whispered to one another. But then, Raymond spoke, "I fully support this. And I believe if anyone can make this vision real, it is Susan." His words were like a seal. I saw certain eyes in the room shift to agreement. That was enough. The project was approved. The months that followed were busier than I had ever known. With a small team, mostly younger colleagues, I organized workshops, invited guest speakers, launched mentoring sessions. Not everything went smoothly. There were snide looks, mocking whispers. But the results were undeniable. Productivity rose, employees became more engaged, and voices that once trembled now spoke firmly, unafraid to debate. Unexpectedly, some male colleagues joined too, at first out of curiosity, but eventually listening sincerely. Many admitted they had never noticed the barriers women faced. The change began small, but spread outward like ripples from a stone dropped into water. Meanwhile, Jennifer remained silent in the meetings I chaired. She no longer raised her voice, no longer sneered. Each time I announced a new success, I saw her eyes flicker, her lips pressed tight. It wasn't admiration nor hatred. It was something else, reluctant acknowledgement. The game was over, and she had lost. Uncle David was quieter than ever. No more boasting, no more barbed remarks. He sat at the far end of the table, eyes lowered like an old man, abandoned in the very battlefield he once dominated. One evening, coming home late, I found Emma waiting in the kitchen. She laid a folded newspaper on the table. Senior VP Susan Patterson launches Women's Leadership Program, Reshaping Corporate Culture. She grinned. "You know, Mom, my friend said you're like a hero in a movie." I laughed and pulled her into my arms. But inside I knew the truth. I wasn't a hero. I was simply a woman who had been dismissed, humiliated, and chose not to break. I was building a legacy, not with loud acts of vengeance, but with real change, with undeniable results. And I knew that was the most powerful strike of all. Chapter 12. Climax and Ending. When the pity case became a symbol 1 year after that fateful gala, the company once again held its annual awards ceremony. But this time, I was no longer the woman hiding in the shadows. I walked onto the stage as the keynote speaker greeted by thunderous applause that echoed across the ballroom. The spotlight blazed down on me. I looked toward the front row where my 3 children sat, their eyes shining with pride. Emma gave a small nod as if to say, "You've got this, Mom." Michael raised a thumbs up while Sophie waved both hands excitedly. I took the microphone, inhaling deeply. 1 year ago, right here in this very place, I was called a family pity case. I was mocked for being a single mother with 3 children. My pain was turned into entertainment. But that moment changed everything. It taught me this being underestimated can become your greatest strength. The room was utterly silent. I saw a few faces lower, no doubt recalling last year's scene. I continued, when people look down on you, they don't pay attention to what you're building. They're too busy laughing while you're too busy working. And when you rise, when you prove yourself with results, they cannot deny they're not just surprised. They are forced to acknowledge you. The applause started softly, scattered at first, then swelled into waves of clapping that filled the hall. I waited until it calmed, then spoke slowly, firmly tonight. I don't revisit the past to take revenge on anyone. I speak for all those who have ever been called failures, cast aside, or told they were not enough. Don't believe it. Your wounds can become the very foundation of your strength. And when you rise, you won't just save yourself. You'll open the path for others. I scanned the room. At a back table, Jennifer sat with her head bowed, her eyes red. Uncle David sat stiff, gripping his glass tightly, but saying nothing. They were still there, forced to hear every word, forced to witness the respect in the eyes of the crowd. That was the sentence I had chosen for them. After this speech, the entire hall rose to its feet. The ovation thundered on and on. I looked at my children, Emma with tears streaming down her cheeks, Michael beaming with pride, Sophie wearing a paper crown atop her head. To them, I was no longer just their mother. I was someone who had fought and reclaimed her place. Weeks later, the Women's Leadership Initiative officially became a permanent division in the company. Female employees were mentored, trained, and given fair opportunities to advance. The toxic culture of competition began to dissolve, replaced by collaboration and respect. I watched faces that once sat silently in the back now speak boldly in meetings. That was my legacy, and it was greater than any act of revenge. One evening, I brought my children to a small company gathering. While I chatted with colleagues, Sophie tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, what do they call you?" I bent down smiling. "What do they call me?" She grinned wide. "They call you the boss." I laughed, pulling her into my arms. A year ago, she had drawn that crayon picture scrawling the words, "the boss." And now her innocent dream had become reality. I realized then the sweetest revenge doesn't come from watching your enemies fall. It comes from transforming scorn into strength, turning ridicule into recognition and turning a pity case into a symbol. And I knew my journey was far from over, but this time I would walk it not in darkness, but in the light of truth, of strength, and of belief. I had won, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed. Once I thought the sweetest revenge was making those who hurt me pay the price. But then I realized the true victory isn't in breaking them down. It's in living strong enough that they are forced to watch. They called me a pity case, and that very label became the starting point of my journey, turning pain into power. I am no longer the forgotten one in the shadows. I am the woman standing on stage, building a legacy and opening the path for other women to follow. That is the sweetest revenge of all, not just surviving, but thriving. And I want you to remember this. If anyone has ever looked down on you, let your success be the answer.